I was looking at the upcoming releases to come from WizKids for their Dungeons and Dragons line of miniatures. Basically, it's much like Magic the Gathering or something like any kind of card game where they're constantly putting out new releases based off of a theme throughout the year. And I noticed that later this year they're going to be releasing miniatures based off of the Spelljammers um, setting within Dungeons and Dragons. And for those that don't know, not that I'm a huge Dungeons and Dragons expert, but Dungeons and Dragons is like the game system, but it's not necessarily the game world. It's not necessarily the setting, right? The various settings of Dungeons and Dragons games, the official ones, are like Forgotten Realms, which is what most people are familiar with. That's where like a lot of the books and games take place. Like Baldur's Gate takes place in the Forgotten Realms setting. You could call it a very sort of typical fantasy world setting, right? But then there's others that are more horror based or more darker. Like there's this setting called Dark Sun, which could be kind of associated with something more along the lines of like a Dark Souls, even maybe. Uh, and then there's this other setting which they haven't used too much lately, but in like the 90s it was a thing called Spelljammers, the Spelljammers setting for D&D. And Spelljammers is interesting because it incorporates science fiction, a bit of science fiction and space faring into the setting. So yeah, there's ships and laser guns and stuff like that. In addition to the orcs and all of that stuff that you would see in your typical D&D kind of game. In fact, the orcs are called like Srocks or something like that. It's just orcs backwards. Agent, you love me some Forgotten Realms, Dragonlance. Oh yeah, yeah, of course, Dragonlance. How could I forget Dragonlance? And again, I'm not a huge expert in D&D, but like as far as the actual pen and paper game, although I do have a number of miniatures from D&D, and I have a number of a couple of starter sets and stuff like that. I just never really got around to playing it, but I do play like the computer games and stuff like that. And the books, I really loved all of those R.A. Salvatore, Drizzt Do'Urden. I'm sure you're familiar with those two, Agent. Drizzt and Canterbury. That's what we're listening to now. Is actually Baldur's Gate 2. Drizzt. I'm pretty sure you encounter Drizzt and everyone else in Baldur's Gate 2 or 1. I forget. But yeah, the Spelljammer setting is pretty interesting, as I was mentioning. And they recently have announced that they're making miniatures based off of the Spelljammers uh, setting, which is pretty neat. I'm pretty excited about that because I was looking at some of the miniatures, and there's like a giant gerbil. It's like a miniature literally called Giant Space Gerbil or Space Hamster. I was like, I want that. That looks hilarious. And there's a lot of weird, funky things like that too. So yeah, that might be fun to get, and yeah, and to paint. That'll be fun. I just like weird, fun models too. Agent, if you could see the shelf behind my computer desk that I'm staring at right now. Oh, you got a bunch of D&D books or miniatures all behind you. That's sweet. Sweet. Did you see? I think on Wired's YouTube channel, they recently did an article on this group of gamers that have been keeping up with D&D, like the same D&D campaign for like 20 years or something like that. It's really really crazy to think about. It's like, whoa. They've been doing that for that long, and yeah, this guy, like, he has a whole setup. I'm pretty sure he streams on Twitch too. He has a whole setup, all these miniatures, and friends and family come and go and play, and like their children would like you know, they would have kids and then they kind of grow up and start playing the game too. That is really, really cool. Am I okay with links? Yeah, no problem. So long as you ask, I think that's fine. Hit me up, hit me up. Let's take a look. Ba, ba, ba. Need an excuse to post something on your Insta? Oh, okay, cool. I'll definitely give you a follow on Insta as well. I've you Nightbot has probably spammed my Insta link, but if it hasn't, you can find it through the about page on my bio and stuff like that. No problem. So there we have it, folks. This is probably a good time to put this to rest for now. We've successfully applied a base coat layer on all of this model, and from now on it's a matter of shading and highlighting. So yeah, and of course the base needs to be done too, but we'll save that for another time. I wasn't thinking about the base. Yeah, so the next few streams should be pretty fun as we get into highlighting and stuff. But that's this guy. So let's put a pin on this model. Boop. Put a pin. Boop. And take a look at some other stuff now. I see that Agent has a link for me. So let's take a look at this stuff in the meantime. Just give me a moment, folks, while we get all of that ready. Whoop. Sorry, not that one. Break time. Just give me a moment while I get all this stuff ready and we can take a look. I'm assuming you're okay with taking a look at this on stream. Give me a second. I'm such a noob at this. Wow, that is a lot. Man. So you've read all of these, or you still have to read some of them? Yeah, I've definitely haven't read this many Dungeons and Dragons, Forgotten Realms novels. That is so sweet. Ah, oh, that's just reminding me of like when I used to read a lot. I was probably I was the kid that like kind of read beyond my like age group, you know? Like if I was in like grade grade 5, grade 7, I was reading like books that were meant for like people in high school and stuff. Yeah, and I remember doing a book report. It was like grade 6 or 7. And we had to do a book report. Oh, I see R.A. Salvatore up there. We had to do a book report, and I did one on Icewind Dale, right? Like one of the first books in Icewind Dale, like the Halfling's Gem or something like that. And you know, it's like 300 pages, something crazy like that. Meanwhile, all the kids are reading Goosebumps, right? And my teacher was like, "Are you sure you read this? Because that's a lot." I was like, "Yep, I read that." That shelf is all drizzed. Halfling's Gem. Oh yeah. That's a lot, Bacon. Oh, and there's some couple of Spelljammers at the very top. Do you have a recommendation for Spelljammers? Because I kind of want to. I I only recently found out about this Spelljammer setting, so yeah, that's something that I would definitely want to look into more. Let's. Whoa. Let me do a quick search because I'll show you guys the Spelljammers. Space Hamster? Where's the miniature though? I want to find the miniature. What if I just type in Spelljammers miniatures? Yeah, let's just go back to the captures. Shit, I thought I'd find it really quickly, but let's just go back to the Capture. Oh. Oh, actually, there's a YouTube thing. We can watch that, actually. Agent, I did one on Passage to Dawn, if I remember correctly. Into the Void is Spelljammers, but based on Forgotten Realms. And Beyond the Moons is based around Dragonlance. And I also have Maelstrom's Edge. Yeah, so interestingly enough, from this range of Spelljammers, let's actually watch this YouTube video, because there's something very interesting that I noticed about this YouTube video for Spelljammer. Ooh, let's pause the music too. Hold up, hold up. We don't want to have the music going on in the background. It's just, pardon moi. Yeah, so this applies to Bacon 2. Pay attention to what you see here. You might find a character that you know. Whiz kids.
Beyond worlds. Cold, hot, light, dark, watery, and earthen. They all share one basic need. A need for heroes. Attention Voyagers. At long last, the epic
Look, who was that on the right?
returns.
That was Minsk and Boo from Icewind Dale. Minsk and Boo riding some kind of space dragon, Zodar, Flapjack. Where's that hamster? Look at these crazy characters. Look, that's the one I want. Giant Space Hamster. I want that space hamster. 2-in-1 combined figures. OMG. Oh. Look at that guy. He looks like a beholder, but with a body. Get tactical. Oh, and then, yeah, there's a number of ship scale figures. Look at this Spelljammer. Very kind of like Guardians of the Galaxy.
Collect all Icons of the Realms figures online or at your local game store this fall.
So that's pretty neat. Let's go back to Shift F4. That looks pretty neat. I'm looking forward to the hamster. But yeah, when Agent mentioned that there's sort of like some kind of crossover, like it was based on Spelljammers, but it's based on Forgotten Realms, and then Beyond the Moons is based on Dragonlance. That reminded me of this trailer because, yeah, it says Spelljammers, but then you see Minsk and Boo. And I was like, oh, that's cool. They travel from what do they call it? Dimension setting to setting. They kind of travel from place to place. That's kind of cool. That almost reminds me of something more like Magic the Gathering, where Magic the Gathering, the planeswalkers can go from plane to plane, and there's all these different worlds and settings. And it seems like with Dungeons and Dragons, and they're all owned by the same company now, by the way, that they're kind of doing a little bit of that too, which is cool. I'm looking forward to Dark Sun coming back. Not that I know too much about Dark Sun or Planescape. That would be cool. Bacon, those are dope. Day one purchase for you? Yeah, I'll get a couple. However, those models that were shown there, those are the collectible miniatures line. It's much like the Lego blind packs, you know? So you get a box, or HeroClix, right? You get a box, and then there's going to be like 3 or 4 miniatures inside that you really don't know what you're getting. And then what WizKids do is that they will then release unpainted models, much like how this is, or I have the... Oh yeah, I've got these two. The Mimics, which I should probably do pretty soon as well. Some of these Mimics. And that's what inspired me to do my these D&D themed emotes that I have. The Mimic and the Beholder. Oh, let's get some music back on. So yeah, it's day one so long as they release a unpainted version of the Space Hamster that I can just buy straight up, and I don't have to rely on just picking it up blindly, right? And and hoping that I get it right. Now, if it comes to the point where there's no unpainted version of the Space Hamster, then I'll buy him. I'll pick him up independently. Like there'll be there's sellers out there that will sell it just a single model. I'll just get it then. And even I did see in Ottawa there was a store called the Wizard's Tower. They sell some single miniatures from those packs. I'll just buy it then, and then I'll strip the paint off of them, and then do it that way. Agent, I just looked it up to reconfirm. Moon's Void and Maelstrom make up the Cloak Master Cycle series, so they're a set. Interesting. And there's six in total? Okay. So maybe I'll check out the first one. That sounds pretty fun. There's also Radiant Dragon, Broken Sphere, and Ultimate Helm. Well, that does sound pretty interesting because it kind of bleeds into like other settings. That sounds pretty cool. Yeah, so I'm the kind of guy that has is familiar with Dungeons and Dragons, but never has actually played like the actual D&D game. But when it comes to the books, like yeah, the I haven't even read all of the Drizzt Do'Urden books. Well, do they ever really end? They're still going on if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I've read those as a kid and then into my teenage years and beyond. So yeah, that's it. That's always a fun setting to come back to and read. Very cool, very fun stuff. But yeah, I think we're due to paint these guys at some point as well, seeing as how I recently made the mimic emote there. But I am thinking about converting this miniature, or getting a second one and converting it to look more like a Dark Souls style mimic. Getting some arms and legs, cutting it apart and stuff. I'm thinking about it, but I kind of want to paint a traditional mimic like this as well. So I might have to buy a second pack. I don't know. They're not that expensive, so it's not a big deal. Just more stuff on the backlog. And this guy's been always off stream, just right beside me, but sometimes never on stream. The good old beholder senpai, as I call him. He just watches me as I paint. But yeah, I think that might do it for me today, guys.